This podcast is brought to you by the AlmaMAC and Scientific Canada. It was recorded on the traditional territories shared between the Haudenosaunee and Anishinaabe nations. Enjoy.
What's going on, everybody? Thanks for tuning back to the AlmaMAC here on 93.3 CFMU, where every Thursday, 12 to 12:30, we interview a McMaster graduate student so we can learn more about their research and, of course, what they enjoy doing inside and outside of the lab. So on today's episode, we welcome second-year PhD candidate Sydney Valentino. Sydney is in the Department of Kinesiology in the Faculty of Science. How are you doing today, Sydney?
Yeah, I'm doing great. I'm excited to chat about science and how my life just revolves around it.
Awesome. And I'm certain our listeners are excited to hear about that as well. So why don't we just jump right in? Do you mind just briefly describing your research for the listeners?
Yeah, I always like to think about medication and how we prescribe things. And then I like to think about exercise and how this might be similar. Doctors prescribe you a medication and you have a perceived benefit from that. You think you'll maybe feel healthier, feel better after having that medication. Well, you have that every day for a number of weeks. Exercise is just the same thing, except we really can't really grasp in a single list all the benefits that you should receive after being physically active. You can break your exercise prescription down into 5 different components: your frequency of exercise, the intensity of exercise, or how hard you're running, or whatever sport you're doing, the time or the amount of time you spend exercising, the type, and then kind of overall the volume and progression. I like to kind of put that into one. And so this acronym of FIT plus VP, or volume and progression, is what I'm really interested in. I want to know how to prescribe exercise. And for people who have trouble, they have like nuances that don't really allow them to do exercise and have it prescribed to them in usual ways. Sometimes we might use heart rate as a measurement to prescribe exercise. We want to go at a certain percentage of the maximum heart rate, but many people with like a spinal cord injury don't have an increase in their heart rate. So it's really important to investigate exactly how we can prescribe exercise to them.
Yeah, and it's really interesting that you're kind of studying this intersection of accessibility and exercise. And quite frankly, it's not something I considered before learning more about your research. So if we can kind of focus on this a little bit. So individuals with spinal cord injuries, can you speak to why they may be experiencing maybe cardiovascular dysfunction and why you have to consider that when you may be prescribing them an exercise prescription?
Yeah, people with a spinal cord injury have basically some sort of disruption. Think of an electrical cord that's being cut, or some of the wires are frayed. Not all of the signal is going to get to the end. And that end thing we're looking at is the heart. And there's a balance that the heart actually sends messages back up to your brain every time, within each heartbeat. You don't have a heart rate of 70 beats per minute. It's actually varying, like 69, 71, and it goes back and forth, constantly adapting to everyday things around you. So people with a spinal cord injury have this disruption in both directions. So whether your spinal cord injury is at a lower spot in your spinal cord or higher up, it will tell you kind of how much disruption they're going to have. So above a certain level, kind of around your neck, there's the most disruption, and your heart rate doesn't increase generally above 120 beats per minute, which might not, to put that into context, it's kind of as you get up and you're standing up and walking around, maybe you're a young, healthy person might have a heart rate of 90 to 100. So you really can't get above, kind of walking pace, brisk walking pace. But then again, so they have a smaller muscle group. They're in a wheelchair, and they can't deliver blood out to the rest of their body as quickly because their heart rate is reduced. So this has to do, again, with the nerve signals that go back and forth, and really any level of injury it's not just the heart that's affected, it's all blood movement throughout the body. So we could think about the delivery to the muscles, the delivery to your brain. All of this is disrupted when you have a spinal cord injury. And so you can use other methods to try and prescribe exercise and also monitor your exercise to actually be sure that you're going to get, an improvement, long-term improvement in your health. And that's what I'm interested in, is these alternate methods of exercise prescription and monitoring and actually looking at long-term, does this prescription and monitoring method that you're doing every day or every other day, whatever their exercise program is, lead to long-term improvements in health? So that's what I'm interested in. It's kind of, it's interesting that the combination between spinal cord injury, and then you can also look at other groups of people. There's many others that we call them special populations that have different reasons why their heart rate would not increase. So maybe they're prescribed with an actual medication that reduces their heart rate. These same exercise prescription methods might be useful for them. So you could think of someone with heart disease and they have beta blockers that reduce their heart rate. So how do they then measure how intense they're exercising?
Okay, so you're mentioning how these traditional methods to measure exercise intensity, such as an increase in heart rate, may not be applicable to these individuals. So what are some other alternative methods that we can use to measure exercise intensity in these populations?
Yeah, and this is the fun part for me as an exercise physiologist. We love to look at, what are the signals saying? What are, I hook you up to some wires, or I put a breathing mask on you and measure the concentrations of oxygen and carbon dioxide. But the combination of looking at exercise physiology and how you perceive exercise, so more exercise psychology, is it's not as commonly combined. It's a bit of a niche, and part of it has to do with, we have these structures where exercise psychology is one, and then it's just very separate. So there's a bit of history when the kinesiology department went from an arts degree to a science degree. Now our department is so heavily science-based and physiology-based, but I'm trying to pull us back into the psychology base, where we think about how people are actually feeling when they exercise. So the specific tool that you can use is called rate of perceived exertion, and it's by no means a new thing. It's just a scale where from the original scale was 6 to 20. And so your 6 is, if you do 6 times 10, that's 60 beats per minute. That's generally your heart rate at rest, or when you're lying down, just when you wake up in the morning. And it goes all the way up to 220, which 200 beats per minute is generally the maximum heart rate of a young, healthy person. So that 6 to 20 scale kind of, goes in a mathematical linear fashion. As you increase your exercise intensity, you increase your heart rate, and your RPE is what we call it, rate of perceived exertion. You can use pretty much any scale. It doesn't need to be a 6 to 20. It can be a 1 to 10. So they shorten the scale to this more, because we think about, 1 to 100, 1 to 10. It's a little bit easier to conceptualize. And this scale, you can then use that as an anchor to say, okay, well, at a 9 out of 10, I can go at this intensity for 5 minutes, but then I can't go anymore. So you can think about it in different contexts. And this scale, I'm interested in understanding at these different levels, 1 to 10, what actually are people feeling when they exercise, right? Because if these people with spinal cord injury don't have an increase in their heart rate, or they have actually a change in their sweating ability as well, because this all has to do with blood, how blood is moved around in the body. And as heat moves closer to your skin, then that's when you sweat to have that transfer of energy. So what are they actually feeling? If they have all these traditional markers of exercise intensity that able-bodied people have, how can we mark and help them perceive their exercise intensity, and then get them on their way to a healthy, active lifestyle where they can go out and they know, okay, if I exercise at this intensity for 30 minutes, this is what it feels like. Maybe it's a 9 out of 10. Then I will have improved cardiorespiratory fitness, or it's just a marker to say, they're going to be less breathless in their everyday life. So that thinking about how they feel and then how this translates to their everyday life is, I think it'll help people stay active and give them the tools that they need to improve their fitness and feel more empowered in their own body, right? Because they're really cluing into how they feel when they exercise.
And can you walk us through maybe what a project or study with this might look like? For instance, are you recruiting individuals with a spinal cord injury and you ask them to exercise for 10 or 15 minutes and then they fill out the scale that you were talking about? Can you just walk us through that?
Yeah. So what I'm interested in doing is actually collaborating with the Physical Activity Center for Excellence. It's on the McMaster campus, and people from the community, many different wide range of people come in, and they have it's really great because as a kinesiology student, you can volunteer there, and if you're an undergrad, or help prescribe exercise. But we recruit them for some exercise physiology studies, and they are really awesome. They come in, and what I'm hoping to do when I can work with them again is have them kind of like randomize different exercise intensities and ask them to mark their RPE. So with this randomization, we can kind of start creating a calibration curve to figure out exactly what their like individualized equation is with heart rate and a bunch of other different markers of intensity, and trying to figure out, what's the general consensus for people who have different levels of injury. What are their perception? What are these markers that tell us exactly what their intensity is, and how good is RPE at actually monitoring their intensity?
Right. So the RPE, or the ratings of perceived exertion. So this is a scale that's not just used for individuals with spinal cord injury, but for all populations.
Yeah.
But you're trying to see kind of come up, correct me if I'm wrong, but maybe like a validation or a cutoff score of some sort for individuals with spinal cord injuries, depending on the level of injury.
Yeah, I would love to recruit enough people to actually, I'm a really visual person, so I love to think about how it would be visualized in this like magical graph or like infographic. So I could see it as, a spinal cord down the middle, and then at different levels, you're going to have kind of different signals that you could cue into as someone with a spinal cord injury to think about what exercise intensity you're working at, and what prescription actually will lead to these long-term, or not long-term benefits, because I'm not going to follow them for a long time, but these, benefits after 4 weeks of exercise at this specific intensity. So they have their own individual equation, and then kind of at a population level, how do we validate, RPE and heart rate? Is there actually a relationship at all?
And Sydney, you spoke a little bit at the beginning about this idea of clinicians prescribing these exercise prescriptions. Can you speak a little bit about whether doctors are perhaps apprehensive to prescribe exercise prescriptions and why that may be the case?
Yeah, I've read a little bit about this. I don't have any direct experience. I think the hesitation comes from doctors' own experiences with physical activity and risks and what researchers call adverse events. Right? Does someone get hurt when they are prescribed a certain exercise? And then I don't think there's adequate services in the community to actually get people prescribed an exercise that works and that they enjoy. It's one thing for it to work and one thing for people to enjoy it, but what about actually the two of those things together? A really great tool that I'm learning from my exercise psychology colleagues is motivational interviewing. So it's just a technique to basically ask probing questions to individuals about what they enjoy and what they think the solution is. So maybe if we give them all these tools, we say, okay, rate of perceived exertion is great. You like to do wheelchair walks around and movement around your community, or you like to go meet up with friends and you have a number of people that work with you, and but how long do you need to do it, and what's going to be something that you can actually continue doing that you'll long-term enjoy doing and have these benefits from it. So adherence is another issue that happens. Adherence, and kind of when we think about cardiac rehabilitation, so people with heart disease, and when they are out in the community, one of the biggest challenges is there's actually very little continuity between different services. So they're in a hospital, they're getting care. Okay, then they move to outpatient hospital. No one's really following up with them to saying, are you going? And why aren't you going if you aren't going? And then how do they transition out into an unsupervised setting? Are they actually being taught the right tools in those early settings to be self-sufficient at a later time point?
Really interesting. Okay, and Sydney, I'm also curious to know if there is any potential of the RPE, the ratings of perceived exertion, for that scale to be incorporated into exercise guidelines.
Yeah, it's interesting. Actually, other countries have already incorporated it. So how they do that is they say a moderate exercise intensity, maybe from 4 to 6 out of the 10 scale, the 1 to 10 scale. But in Canada, we don't have that same thing. We have different exercise guidelines for each different population, but it's moderate to vigorous is the general intensity prescription. But I think it would be really cool if there's a little bit more guidance and a little bit more resource to teach people about what that is. If we think about a 1 to 10 scale, maybe moderate is 4 to 6 and vigorous is 7 to 9, and we kind of break it down for people.
And maybe if those guidelines are specific to particular populations, because I imagine the guidelines might differ from different populations.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's a tool that could be used for all different populations of people, regardless of what health issues you're working with. And people can, if they understand their body a little bit better, then maybe they'll have the tools they need to get moving and feel confident with what benefits they're getting from exercise.
Nice. So Sydney, it seems like exercise is this common thread throughout your life. I mean, of course, you've devoted your research life to it, but I also hear that it takes up quite a bit of your time outside the lab as well.
Yeah, I'm also a fitness instructor for the Pulse, so the McMaster gym, and I'm excited to be teaching online again. So I always teach on Tuesday mornings right now at 7:30. There's not as many people that like to exercise as I love to be out in the morning. But, for the core people that I do work out with, it's a lot of fun. And the gym community at McMaster is always thriving. And hopefully we can get back to that in person soon. It's really great that my research is in this area, because it's helpful when I'm able to chat with my class participants, and it really feels like I'm embedded in the direct place where my research will have an impact in the future. So thinking about how people can get moving and feel confident and have the tools they need to be healthy and empower them for whatever else they want to do in their life. I think movement is definitely a core of that.
How has it been teaching online?
Yeah, it's been challenging because I think people don't want to be online any more than they already are. But I also think for the people that do reach out and I do connect with, they're always so thankful and they really enjoy it. So it's been really impactful in that way. And I'm happy to lead some of the other instructors as we still continue to bring more people on. And I think the gym experience is really core to, or the athletic center is really core to McMaster, and it'll hopefully bring that community back to life when we can be back together on campus.
Yeah, Sydney, your passion for exercise and movement is palpable. And I'm happy to hear that you also had other opportunities to speak about your research specifically on air. Do you mind giving us a bit of a taste for how that was to be on the radio, if you can speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. I had a really cool experience just last week where I was, it's called a broadcast syndication, where they prepare a story in the morning and they send it out to all the different cities, and they decide, the different city radio stations decide whether or not they want to pick up your story. Well, McMaster, prepared this story about my master's research, and I was part of a really big research team. So I was very surprised when I ended up being the only one that could be available for the radio station calls. But I jumped at the opportunity because I really do love talking about research and getting it out into the world. So it was quite a busy and but very organized experience. I found out in the morning, and that afternoon I had 7 or 8 interviews across the country. And they prepare you by pre-interviewing you and asking you a couple of questions. And from that, you just have a schedule of people that call you from provinces across Canada, different time zones. Sometimes they were live, sometimes they were recorded. The live ones, actually, the 2 best ones that was being introduced after folk music in Newfoundland, which I thought was very stereotypical, but so heartwarming to hear. And then the other one was being introduced after a cockroach scientist. I don't even know what was happening, but he was just comparing cockroaches and bed bugs. And then I was next. So I don't know who decided that order, but it was cool to be part of that. And it was CBC news stations across Canada. So I think different radio stations might do it, but it was cool to do that. And it all started because one of the lead researchers on our team reached out to McMaster and asked and to let them know that this publication was coming out. So it's interesting to know the behind the scenes aspects of how research gets out into the media. So there is a bit of work as a scientist to initiate that. And I would say for people that are thinking about it, it's really rewarding. It's really fun. You just have to be prepared, know your key points, and also, have fun with it. And I really enjoyed the experience. So hopefully I'll be able to do that again sometime. And it's great to be here and chat with you today.
Yeah, and no, we're excited to have had you on our show, especially after that adrenaline rush you must have experienced after having those interviews back to back. I can't imagine.
Yeah, little 5-minute interviews for like 3 hours, just like waiting for calls randomly.
Wow. Wow. Well, thanks for sharing that experience with us. And thanks for also coming on our show today and talking about your really important research.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It's been great to chat.
Oh, happy to hear that. And it was wonderful chatting with you as well. And thank you to all of you who are listening here on 93.3 CFMU or wherever you find this podcast here on the AlmaMAC, where we interview McMaster graduate students. We'll be back next week. But until then, take care, everyone. Bye.
Hello, everybody. Adam again. Looks like we've got about 5 minutes left over. So maybe we're going to try something a little bit different this week. I know I said this before, but this is even differenter from the previous week. Let's call this maybe grad school stories. True stories from grad school. So this one is about, well, me. I think it was my first year as a master's student. So one of the really cool things, benefits of becoming a grad student, at least in my department, is that you get a mailbox. It's in the office, you get a special key, or you can go, into the office and get it through the back slot. But, if the office is locked, you have a key and it's just like a post office. It's really cool. And it really makes you feel like you're at home, like this is your department now. And so nobody really sends you mail. But if you're taking courses and your professor is in your department, sometimes they leave your assignments and stuff in your mailbox. So this was, first year master's physics department, and I'm taking quantum mechanics. And I don't know, I don't test well. So this quantum mechanics course is doing a real doozy on me. And midterm is coming up, and I'm studying hard, and I'm nervous, and I go and write this thing, and it's like a 4-hour test, and I don't know, I think I did okay, but not great. I think I passed probably something in the 60s or 70s. Not looking forward to seeing the result. But I'm checking back in my mailbox every day. Instead of getting the results online like some of the undergraduate courses I've taken, typically you wait to get it handed back to you and then you see it, and at the end of the semester you get your grade. So I'm checking and I'm checking and I'm checking, and I was expecting to see it before my next class in quantum mechanics, but it wasn't there. So we all come back for the class immediately after the exam. It's about a week after the exam, and I see the big stack of tests sitting on our prof's desk. Like, these must be the exams. And of course he doesn't mention them, doesn't talk about them for the entire lecture. Then at the end he says, oh, okay, all right, so we've got the exams here, and I'm just going to call out your name, and you can come up and grab it and go back to your, you can leave or go back to your seat or whatever. You can hang around if you want to talk about it. And this is fine because there's only, I think, 15 of us in this course. So he starts calling off the students, and eventually my name comes around, and I grab it, and I look at the front. It says 32. I go, oh no. The sickest feeling I've ever felt in my stomach. Just, I'm going to throw up all over this test. And I jam it immediately into my bag, and I sit down for a second, and I just try to breathe. It's going to be okay. Calls out the rest of the names. People are sort of murmuring, and they're kind of upset. Professor notices this. And he says, "Oh, the number on the front. Oh, no. Don't look at the number on the front. The front, that doesn't mean anything." So my heart, it lifts. It says, "Yeah, no, I was going to drop these off in your mailboxes. And so I had to look up all of your mailbox numbers, and that's all I wrote on the front." Like, right. I'm mailbox number 32. I didn't get 32 on this exam. He's like, So yeah, if you want to go and look at your mark, I actually wrote it on the second page, so you have a little bit of privacy. It's like, whew. Well, I pull it out of my bag and I open it up and I look to page 2 and it says 36. I got 36%. So that's my story. Thanks for listening. If you like this and you want to hear more, you can head to scientificanada.ca. You can follow me on Twitter at Adam Fortis, Fortais. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week.